Yu-Gi-Oh! The franchise that took the early 2000s world by storm. Following up on the success of Pokemon, Japan saw potential in importing collectibles and merch over to the US, which to be fair wasn't new news even back then. But nothing quite broke the bank like Pokemon. Even poor Digimon, while successful, struggled to keep up with the anime, the cards, and the video games that belong to the Pocket Monsters franchise. But alas, the new era means a new market, and thus Pokemania wasn't quite dead, but it was slowing down, which was perfect for a new franchise to pump blood into the companies of Japan. Yu-Gi-Oh! And manga/anime series that started off as a story about games in general made into a card game that was the most popular aspect of the franchise. Us kids in the West never got to watch the original series, but thanks to the subs, it's now available and you can see my review on it. But back to the point, while we don't get the series dubbed, what we did get was the show's reboot? Re-release? Retelling? What exactly is this thing? We got Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters, a show that, while using the Yu-Gi-Oh! Cast, minus this girl, had a primary focus on the card game that got popular in the former series. Yu-Gi-Oh!, much like several anime of its time, caught wind pretty quickly, and with it came the cards themselves. After all, the characters are playing with the cards, so why not you, the viewer? This is where I, and assume several other Yu-Gi-Oh! Enthusiasts, come in at tender young ages. For me, I was 8 years old at the time. The world of Duel Monsters was placed in my brain face down in defense position. I was on the bus with a childhood friend of mine, and she talked about this new card game. I was so confused. I looked at the cards in her hand, and they looked similar to the cards I saw in the show that kept being shown in commercials. So when I watched Pokemon on Saturdays, I was thinking, what are they? I asked. She said they're Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards. Yu-Gi-Oh! The heck is that? Is it like Pokemon? I look at the cards. These definitely look a lot different than Pokemon cards, I'll say that. She actually gave me a few of her spare cards that she had and ones she wasn't using. Not enough to build a deck, but enough to get a feel of what Yu-Gi-Oh! Is, what it says, what they do. I was taken back. Pokemon was on my Game Boy, but these were in my hand. I don't know, it was just a different experience at the time. I had Pokemon cards, but I didn't know how to play them properly yet. Yu-Gi-Oh! On the other hand felt so easy to understand the basics of. At the time, Jesus Christ. ATK means attack and DEF means defense. So my guess is if I want a monster with a lot of attack, if I want to attack and want a monster to defend me, I need a monster with a lot of defense. Right? I can barely remember the cards she gave me, but a few do stand out, which are Killer Needle, Ancient Brain, Witch of the Black Forest, which at the time I didn't know was good, but I was 8, what are you going to do? And Doma, the Angel of Silence, which out of the whole pile she gave me was my favorite just off of design. I don't know, it's just weird, but when you're 8, you take what you can get. Ever since that day, though, I watched Yu-Gi-Oh! On Saturdays right after Pokemon, just to see if the cards I had would show up. I got into it, I was only 13 cards in, but I would pretend that I was using the cards and I was one of the characters playing them and imagining that the cards would be real, just like in the show. I'd make life point noises, I'd break the rules because nobody read the rule book. I had a ball. I believe my first official episode I watched was the one with Bakura in it, which definitely complicated me for things when it comes to the cast. Thankfully, reruns of Yu-Gi-Oh! Came on weekdays after school, so I was able to catch up from the start later on. The Shadow Realm, Souls, Ancient Egyptians, Duelist Kingdom. So many different phrases to me. When I hopped into Yu-Gi-Oh!, Yugi and his friends were backpacking it across the Duelist Kingdom Island, and trust me, at the time, backpacking with friends in an anime was a scene that I was all too familiar with. But when I said Yu-Gi-Oh! Part was the duels, a bit more strategy than Pokemon. The players had cards and they would stand on these huge stadiums and face off. Techno music would play, a boy with super weird hair transforming into a slightly taller guy with super weird hair. It was like Pokemon, Dragon Ball, and Digimon all combined into one. Crazy. While I was watching the show, there were things that inspired me more specifically. I remember the character Seto Kaiba had made a prototype duel disc that one you threw and had the cards attached to it, and then you reel it back like a frisbee. I wanted to build this thing, so I took a bungee cord, an actual frisbee, and some tape and tried to put my cards on it. This invention failed, obviously, but I had fun trying to make it. Kids at the playground all had cards, and I was trading and dueling using rules I saw on TV, which were questionable at best. But it's clear I was having fun. Good, genuine fun. I was also introduced to my stepdad's son, so my stepbrother and I, who played the game as well. He loved the cards and the shows, so we'd watch it every Saturday morning and play each other all the time. We both convinced our parents to buy us starter decks, and these things were perfect because they came with the paper play mat, a deck of cards, and the official rulebook. One summer, I took a look at the rulebook and just gave it a legit read to find out, and a whole world of things happened in my head that I didn't know before. Life points were at 8,000, not 2,000 or even 4,000 like later in the anime. Level 5 and level 6 monsters needed 1 tribute to summon them, and level 7 monsters and up needed 2 tributes. It was crazy learning these things for the first time, but it all started making sense why levels were on the monsters in the first place. I really legit didn't know why those levels were on there. How could the anime betray me like this, though, I thought. But hey, Pokemon wasn't far different from this when it came to bending the rules, so I got over it quickly. And then, Battle City happened, and you're probably not going to get much argument out of me here, but this was where Yu-Gi-Oh! Was at its most hype. At this point, I'm older and I got a better understanding of the card game, and I even got to buy some booster packs. I had a mix of cards that were terrible and had no synergy, but they were mine, damn it, and I was ready to be king of games, or at least so I thought. It was around that time that the TV show had introduced another staple in my Yu-Gi-Oh! Life. The actual dual disc, this time the complete one. The iconic version that every kid was rocking on their wrists and in the anime. I loved its design, so I imagined in shock when they sold it at Toys R Us. It immediately became a wish list on my gifts that I wanted to get, and I loved the thing. It's a shame Konami to this day hasn't made a version that's a bit friendlier on the edges of your cards, Jesus Christ. But to this day, I use it as a prop for my Yugi cosplays. Yep, I'm that invested. Did I mention I'm a nerd? Going back to a bit though, now that my stepbrother and I had a better understanding of the card game, our goal was simple. Get cards and get good. We noticed that themed structure decks were starting to come out, each one having a bit more strategy in mind when it comes to approaching duels. One of the first structure decks I remember getting was the Ocean Dragon Lord Neo Deadliest, I think is how you pronounce it. Basically a deck that was attributed to water attribute types and water types. And while not as promoted as Pokemon types, they were to play an active role in cards in the game at this time. Other decks revolved around monster types. Some that came to mind that I gotta say through the years past were the Vampire Genesis deck, and then later the Red Eyes Darkness Dragon deck, and the Red Eyes Zombie Dragon deck. As I started to learn more and more, and before I knew it, I had a nice set of spare cards. I also learned that I could use my spares in combination with the structure decks I bought to do some pretty cool combos. I was nowhere near the level of pros, but I had an understanding and definitely played its part in getting me invested. While I do love the competition, it was hard to get my mom to take us to a lot of tournaments at the time. I remember only going to a toy store a long time ago and seeing one tournament, but outside of that, I wasn't at all competitive. I played a lot of rounds with my stepbrother, and between us, I believe he was the better duelist. He just had more cards than I did, and I guess he just had a better knack for the game. I was mad when I was younger, but looking back, I'm proud of him. But I did want to keep up, so I spent hours building decks and drawing 5 cards and making combos with the cards I had made. And I tell you, this card game made an impact on my life. Now, while I wasn't the best at the card game in my household, Yu-Gi-Oh's no stranger to branching off market-wise, so we found ourselves with a few video games that had the Yu-Gi-Oh name on them. My first video game that I played was the Yu-Gi-Oh! Dark Duel Stories. I hated it. It felt like the cards they gave me were trash, and after a while it felt like every move I made was the wrong one. Like the CPU could see everything that I was doing and had an answer to it. One day I finally saw the game show up in a cheat code book. Yeah, if you feel old, remember these things exist. And it told me how to get good cards. It sort of helped out. Sadly, Konami must have seen this coming, and they made better cards that have higher duel costs. So I'm guessing to prevent people from sweeping the game, using good cards, some cards had a card cost, and in order to increase your card cost, you had to increase your duel level. So essentially that means if you want to get a better deck, you got to be a better player. But that means you have to force yourself to use cards like Drool Bird and somehow win. Also, if you beat everyone at once, it means nothing. You have to beat each of them 5 times. My guess was to increase the gameplay time for completionists. I made it a mission one day to do just that, and the furthest I made it was Yamayuki himself. So yeah, once I found out you gotta enter a code to fight others, I just sort of quit. The other games I played were Yu-Gi-Oh! Reshift of Destruction for the Game Boy Advance, which, like many Yu-Gi-Oh! Games at the time, used the card types along with attack and defense power to determine some of the matchups, which I meant I had to change my deck several times if I wanted to beat everyone. Then we moved on to the PlayStation games. The first major one I can think of that I put in a lot of hours was Yu-Gi-Oh! Duelist of the Roses, a game that I even streamed last year and I'm streaming now for this month. Go check it out with my friend Natalie on Twitch. Shameless plug aside, this was one of the more tactical games that, while still used the cards, the monsters had to move spaces, and certain spaces would get power boosts based on what the monsters were on. I loved the soundtrack and I liked other games. It also came with a passcode to unlock the good cards. And like those games, you can't just throw the cards into your deck cause, you guessed it, you gotta have the certain card cost. I then played Capsule Monster Coliseums, but I never got super invested into that one. Now, while my gaming experience with the franchise was washed out due to just other games that came in my life at the time, but my love of card games and the anime still held up strong. When I watched the anime, I loved the Battle City arc. Then I really loved when the movies came out because we got a copy of some of the cards that it came with. I believe it was Pyramid of Light, Andros Sphinx, Sphinx Talea, and Therian, the Great Sphinx. I also believe they had Blue Eyes Shining Dragon that came, but I gave that to my stepbrother immediately. I hate the Blue Eyes White Dragon. And while I mentioned we never got Season 0, there was a moment where I got a taste of Season 0 through the manga. I was at a grocery store and I found a magazine called Shonen Jump. The first thing I saw was Yu-Gi-Oh! On the cover along with Dragon Ball and One Piece. I was curious, so I asked my mom if she could get it. When I grabbed the book and looked inside, it came with a free Yu-Gi-Oh! Card. But it also came with chapters in it. One of the chapters was actually a flashback moment that was in the anime where Joey and Tristan bullied Yugi, only to be bullied by a guy themselves. So Yugi turns into Yami Yugi, aka Tim, and proceeds to challenge the bully to a game, and wherein he lost, he basically killed him. Jesus. I was so confused. So I was able to piece together that this took place before Yugi's duel with Kaiba, but why is it so different? It was there that I learned about how the manga and anime were different, and I didn't really dabble much into the manga after that. It's not that I didn't like it, it's just the Yu-Gi-Oh! Manga without the internet was very hard to come by and collect. Toy-wise, I did have a small amount, but I remember specifically the Duel Stadium toy, and I remember a model Red Eyes Black Dragon I had, which I lost a head to sadly. Then I remember another Duel disc came out, which was based on the filler season of Yu-Gi-Oh! And the Waking of the Dragons arc. The Seal of Orichalco's Duel Disc. And while it didn't have the flashy button change to duel mode like the OG Duel Disc, it was still cool. Imagine an anime's filler saga being so good that it was able to be marketable. Hell, to this day, Konami's been tracking on some of that and using anime exclusive stuff to make them a part of the card games now. I mean, the legendary dragons themselves are now cards. The Seal of Orichalco's. Hell, Attacking the Moon is now a legit Yu-Gi-Oh! Card. And that makes me laugh. After Yu-Gi-Oh! Came to its close, however, I remember thinking, wow, this is it. The show's over. I wonder what happens now. Oh, no, wait, never mind. Yep, almost immediately after Yu-Gi-Oh! Ended here in the US, Yu-Gi-Oh! GX was hot on its heels, and it was playing on Cartoon Network of all channels instead of Kids WB. It was crazy. I was all in. The new characters, Duel Academy, the new cards, it was awesome. Sadly, Yu-Gi-Oh! GX never got dubbed all the way to the US, and even to this day, there's still a chunk of episodes that are just missing. Weirdly, though, that didn't stop them from dubbing the next Yu-Gi-Oh! Series, which I guess they really wanted to market to kids. Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds. Now, I watched the first few episodes dubbed, and at this point in my life, I was getting more into anime, and watching more anime subbed. The internet was a lot more efficient in streaming shows, and I could go on websites and find shows that I wanted to watch. I actually found Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds on a website, and I was also around at the time that I found that the Pokemon had different music and openings in Japan compared to America. So I figured, if there's a difference between Pokemon with their English and Japanese, then Yu-Gi-Oh! Here in the West, I wonder how it compares to Yu-Gi-Oh! In the East. And holy was I in for a surprise. Different openings and endings, less censorship, eye catches, the bopping soundtrack. This was amazing. It felt like I had completely missed out on a whole new world of Yu-Gi-Oh! And I loved Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds in Japanese. After the Dark Signer arc, however, I personally was burnt out on Yu-Gi-Oh! Not just on the anime, but the card game as well. I was 18, headed to college, and at this point, after about 10 years, Yu-Gi-Oh! Was moving on to Yu-Gi-Oh! Zeal, or Zexal, or how do you pronounce this? Anyway, I watched a few episodes but lost interest, and the Yu-Gi-Oh! Card game was adding XYZ monster, XYZ monsters. After Synchros, I was just sort of gimmicked out. Yeah, I know, right? The Pokemon fan saying this of all people. I had given most of my Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards to my stepbrother at this point, and I went to college, sadly. Yu-Gi-Oh! Just didn't come with me. Yu-Gi-Oh! For all intents and purposes had been gone from my life. Until, now I really can't explain it, but I'll try. I guess it was with Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links when it came out. Now, while I wasn't playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Anymore, I did keep track of the card game, and I knew that the anime was still playing at the time. Series like Zexal / Zeal, whatever you want to call it, Arc V, Vrains, XYZ monsters, Pendulum monsters, and Link monsters. I checked in on the franchise from time to time just to see what was happening, and I think it was during the movie Dark Side of Dimensions when that came out, I was slowly but surely getting back into the Yu-Gi-Oh! Kick. The movie did a really great job of bringing back the old cast while still moving forward. You want a full review of that, check it out on the channel. Second plug aside though, I remember I went to Target and I saw a Dark Side of Dimensions booster pack. For shits and giggles, I decided to go ahead and buy a few to see what was inside. To my surprise, I got not one copy, but 2 copies of SLIFER the Sky Dragon. Now, I'm aware at this point the Egyptian God cards are severely outclassed by other monsters in the current meta, but it was still very cool just to have a God card in my possession, legitimately. I started watching videos from people like Team APS, SEMO, and TGS Anime. I downloaded the Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links game, and while I was understanding the current Yu-Gi-Oh! Rules, it was good to play the Yu-Gi-Oh! Game that didn't have all the current gimmicks used. Mostly just with the classic set of adjusted rules for faster gameplay. And yeah, I know, until now, where they have all the gimmicks now, except for Link summons, I think. But hey, it was fun. I was getting back into Yu-Gi-Oh! Again. It was at this point where I wanted to cosplay as Yu-Gi at anime conventions, and I collected the cards again and made a legit deck. I was getting a lot more competitive in all aspects of my life, like Pokemon. I had taken up Magic the Gathering thanks to a friend of mine, and I was getting into training using Daisy along with Princess Peach for Super Smash Bros. So Yu-Gi-Oh! Just sort of fell back into my competitive place. Nowadays, while I know my deck isn't on any championship meta, I wanted to focus on SLIFER the Sky Dragon since it was one of my favorite cards. And woe and behold, Konami must have been spying on me because they made a SLIFER and Obelisk themed deck. It was so cool to see the old monsters get support in addition to SLIFER getting extra support with the release of the King's Court booster pack set. I realized I was deck building wrong. Back in the day, I would just buy one structure deck and some booster packs. Now I realize I'm supposed to buy a maximum of 3 copies of the deck so that I can have duplicates and support for when I need them, minding the band and limit sheets, obviously. It was thanks to this knowledge, though, that I was able to make more effective decks. While not meta, I'm a lot more confident that they can hold their own in casual duels now. Currently, I run 2 decks that both revolve around SLIFER. The first one relies heavily on getting SLIFER on the field. It has Obelisk as well as Wicked Avatar as support aces. Basically no extra deck gimmicks, just pure raw power. The second deck has SLIFER in it, but he plays more of a backup ace role in favor of the ARCANA Knights, which I'm really glad they got support from because I love the poker card Knights aesthetic. This one revolves around Jack's Knights, Queen's Knight, and King's Knight respectively, along with Imperial Bower and Joker's Knight. Konami even made a THUNDERSPEED summon card, mostly for the ARCANA Triumph's Joker card, but, well, look at the art. We all know what they had in mind. So, I like to think of this as the deck where SLIFER's no longer an ancient beast that kills whatever's in his wake, but he's become more tame and works with humans in the good fight. I don't know, my headcanon's weird. Videos and stream-wise, I mean, hell, you all have seen it. I reviewed each major arc of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monster series with my friend Natalie. Last month, I streamed Duelist of the Roses, the White Rose story. I got with Callus, and she joined in for a few videos as well. I had, in recent years, effectively gotten back into the Yu-Gi-Oh! Franchise, and it feels good. While I've watched Sevens, I was mixed. I wouldn't say I'm a hardcore fan, but I was back then, and now I'm an adult. I can fully realize my fandom and take it to new heights. I can make future videos like these. Duels in local tournaments. Hell, maybe even one day get a chance to duel in a competitive set. Yu-Gi-Oh! May have left my life for a little bit at one point, but to this day it remains one of the 3 major pillars of my life as far as a childhood. The content creation-wise being shown on my channel, next to Pokemon and Dragon Ball Z, the 3 being the 3 series that I discuss the most on this channel. With Duel Monsters March upon us, what other experience will we have in Yu-Gi-Oh? Well, I'm streaming Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duels on Sundays, we got Duel Links streams, more videos to come with guests, so for the future, and the present, and the past, thank you, Yu-Gi-Oh! And a big thank you to you, Kazuki Takahashi. Rest in peace. And thank you for giving me a franchise that I've come to love for so long. And until then, Tyrone the God 3 out, and...
It's time to do